Hello, my name is Randy Hootman, and on behalf of Yggdrasil Computing, I'd like to welcome you to this seminar on the installation of Linux. I've been giving these seminars for a while, and we at Yggdrasil thought it would be a good idea to make these seminars available on video. This is the first of these productions. There are future videos planned. Professionally, I've been programming computers since 1968. I've worked here in Silicon Valley as a software developer for the past 6 years. This has included working on such projects as DBase 4 and the EOPen computer. But I'm really quite excited about the abilities of Linux, as I've always wanted my own personal Unix-like workstation at home for my own use. After all, that's what I was using at work, and I felt very limited by the operating systems available currently for the PC. Well, what is Linux? Linux is a term that loosely refers to all the software that goes together to make a usable Unix-like operating system. Technically, Linux is the POSIX-based kernel written by Linus Torvalds from Finland. POSIX is basically a public specification for a Unix-like operating system. Linux started out as a personal project by a student named Linus Torvalds. He wanted to develop a kernel to replace an earlier, less powerful Unix-like operating system called Minix. Linus released the source code for the Linux kernel to the internet, and it has since blossomed into what it is today, a stable operating system. While complete source code for the Linux kernel is available, it is not in the public domain. Linux is copyrighted by Linus Torvalds and the many other contributors under the Free Software Foundation's general public license. The Linux kernel is free software, but if you distribute copies of the Linux kernel, you must either include a copy of the source code or take certain steps spelled out in the general public license to ensure that the source code is readily available at essentially no cost. Linux was written entirely from scratch and currently runs on Intel-based platforms that support a 386 or better processor. There are currently ports to other platforms under the way. This includes the Motorola 68000, the DEC Alpha, and the PowerPC. Linux is developed using an open development and distribution model. This is in contrast to the traditional closed centralized model of commercial software. What I mean by this is that the current version of Linux is always public and anyone can use it. This results in new functionality being released, bugs being found, and corrections implemented very quickly. From personal experience, I know that this can sometimes only take a matter of hours from the submission of an improvement to a new public release. This would be an impossible feat for the commercial software industry to match. Could you imagine finding a bug in your favorite word processor and having a fix for it in a matter of hours? Because so many new versions of Linux are offered to the public, Linus has instituted a kernel numbering convention to let people know whether they are getting a stable release or a developmental version. The version number of the kernel is always in the form of 1.x.y. This is where x and y are numbers. If x is an even number, the kernel is intended to be stable. If x is an odd number, then it is a developmental version. Most versions of Linux are quite stable, developmental or not. In other words, what I'm saying, it isn't that dangerous to stay on the bleeding edge. Historically, people used to take a Linux kernel and gather different pieces of software from here and there, and they put together their own software system. While some may look back on this romantically, this was time-consuming and complicated. To alleviate these repetitive tasks, people have developed what are known as distributions. A distribution is a collection of software consisting of the Linux kernel and all the support programs needed to constitute a useful Unix-like system. All distributions are called Linux, but the consumer must remember several things. Different distributions contain different support software. The kernel is likely to be different. Also, one of the key differences is the method of installing Linux. Installation varies between distributions. There are many different distributions. Today, we will be installing the Yggdrasil, the Red Hat, and Slackware distributions. These are the more popular distributions. Well, just what does Linux give you? Well, it gives you true multitasking, which is the ability to run multiple programs at the same time. It is multi-user, in other words, several users on the same machine at the same time. And Linux runs in the protected mode with memory protection between processes. In other words, one program cannot bring down the whole operating system. For the technically inclined, Linux also has paged virtual memory, shared libraries, System 5 and BSD compatibility, 387 floating point emulation if you need it, POSIX job control, virtual consoles, and transparent support for many of the common operating file systems. I could go on. There are people who like to take the challenge of getting Linux to run on their own little small 2 meg 386SX computer with one floppy drive and a supported video card. However, to get real world work done, you're going to need a little bit more. Depending upon your needs, your wishes, and of course your budget, you'll probably want to go beyond the minimum usable configuration. If you're going to use computationally intensive programs, such as the X Window system, TeX, or the GNU-C compiler, you'll probably want to have a fast processor. You'll want to have at least 8 megabytes of memory to use X. One major difference that you will see with the memory under Linux is the fact that it does make a difference if you add more memory to your computer. It's not restricted to the 640 kilobyte limit as with other operating systems. So if you're going to use any of the popular distributions, you can assume that you will need about 200 megabytes of hard disk space to give you a system that you can use. This includes X. The real amount of hard disk space is dependent, of course, on what you want to install. Linux supports most SCSI and IDE devices. This includes hard drives, CD-ROM drives, and some of the tape drives. Most Super VGA, VGA, EGA, CGA, and Hercules video cards are supported by Linux. Most common networks cards are also supported. Linux uses TCP/IP networking, which includes FTP, Telnet, RLogin, NFS, SLIP, CSLIP, PLIP, PPP, and many other options that are available. Also, many sound cards are also supported. For more information on hardware, you will want to read the Hardware Compatibility How-To Guide, which is available on the internet and is also printed in a number of Linux books. This includes the Linux Bible. Most common Unix tools and programs have been ported to Linux. This includes almost everything from GNU. Many X clients have also been ported. Minor modifications to the source or to your make files are usually all that is required to porting software to Linux. Also, Linux has AutoConf and iMake to help make porting software easier. The number of applications available for Linux is enormous. All the basic Unix commands are there. Developers will appreciate the development tools available, from debuggers to compilers, C++ to Perl, and many other tools are available. Many X window managers are available. These include FVWM, TWM, OpenLook, and Motif. Many editors and text processors are also available. These include several versions of Emacs and VI. There are a number of shells, including the Born Again shell, the Korn shell, and T-shell, or the extended C shell. All your popular news readers and mail readers are available to you under Linux as well. And there are too many games to mention. However, I do have to mention the ever popular Doom. It's available on Linux as well. What I have mentioned is only a small portion of what is available under Linux. The sources for everything is available on archive sites all over the world, the most popular being sunsite.unc.edu and tsx11.mit.edu. There is an ever-increasing number of Linux users in the world. This is evidenced by the activity on the internet and on the news groups. Many small businesses have sprung up selling and supporting Linux. You can get support for Linux on the internet news groups under comp.os.linux. That's comp.os.linux, comp.os.linux. You should also read the Linux frequently asked questions, known as the Linux FAQ, which are posted on the Linux news groups. Any of the O'Reilly and Associates books on Unix-related subjects will be helpful, as the O'Reilly and Associates books are the definitive word on this subject. The Linux Journal is a magazine dedicated to Linux that has something for every level of Linux user in each and every issue. Technical support is also available. Yggdrasil offers technical support via a number of means. This includes a consulting hotline, business technical support, release on demand support, development contracts, and guaranteed technical support. Yggdrasil also produces its own Linux distribution on CD-ROM. This is known as the plug-and-play Linux. It also produces this video, the Linux Internet Archive Set, and the Linux Bible. So, where do you go now? Well, you could get Linux from the previously mentioned FTP archive sites, but this would take some time. So it's probably in your best interest to get a distribution on CD-ROM. You would also want to be sure to read the how-tos and the Linux frequently asked questions. Before we go on to the installation and setup of Linux in a few minutes, users must make some decisions before they install. These decisions are common to all distributions. First, you need to determine how you want to install Linux. Do you want to install it on top of a DOS file system, or do you want to partition a hard drive for Linux? Do you want to have multiple operating systems available at boot? And just how much hard drive space are you willing to devote to Linux? First, I do not recommend installing Linux on top of your DOS file system using UMS-DOS. I recommend partitioning your drive and devoting partitions to Linux. This will mean that you will need to back up your data already on the drives. This is because fdisk will destroy your data. There is a non-destructive tool for partitioning your disk called FIPS, or FIPS. However, I do not recommend this. The reason that I do not recommend installing on top of DOS or using FIPS is due to problems that some users have reported. Next, I recommend devoting at least 3 hard drive partitions to Linux. That would be for your root file system, your swap partition, and your home partition. I recommend at least 200 megabytes of memory for your root file system, more if you can afford it. For your swap partition, I recommend at least twice the amount of memory that you have in your machine. That is, if you have an 8 megabytes of memory, you should have a swap partition of at least 16 megabytes in size. Finally, the amount of space for your home partition will vary depending upon the number of users on your system. For a single user system, 50 megabytes should do nicely. Now, these are just general guidelines and recommendations. However, the system is yours, and you'll undoubtedly want to tailor the system to your own needs. I'd like to thank you for your interest and participation. Now on to the demonstration of installation and setup of Linux using the Yggdrasil, Red Hat, and Slackware distributions.